Welcome to the Surrendering to the Signs podcast. I'm your host, Laura Gates. If you've made it this far and listened to the entire first series of these episodes, I'm very grateful that you've spent this time with us and been able to join us on this journey. In several of these conversations, you've probably heard references to the loss of my youngest sister, Janice. This is a topic I have a hard time talking about. Maybe in a future series we can get into it. However, my sister Janice is very much behind this podcast in every way. In fact, when she died and I went into her room for the first time, I walked in the room, and in the middle of the room was the headset and the microphone that I'm using to record this podcast. And Janice always knew, we talked all the time about, clients would say to me, "Oh, I hear your voice in my head. You should do a podcast." And the fact that in her room was this equipment, I felt like it was an absolute sign from the universe. And when I called Daniel DeSouza, who's behind the scenes of this podcast, helping me every step of the way in terms of editing and producing the content that you're hearing now, I called him to tell him that Janice had passed away, and I told him about the podcast equipment, and he said, "You need to do a podcast." And he said, "I'm going to help you." And it's been quite a journey. It's been a journey of me overcoming my fear of being seen in parts of myself that have not been visible to the public, overcoming my fear of how I might be judged by others. All the things that we encounter when we think about pursuing our purpose in life that stops us, right? I've had all of those things. How people would perceive the things that I'm talking about or the things my guests are talking about, and what does that mean for others? But I realized also, thanks to my sister's passing, that we really have a brief moment in time on this earth, and I want to make the most of it. I want the best and highest use of my time and energy to be utilized to the fullest extent. And if I only focus on the executive coach consulting side of myself, then I'm not fully expressing myself. And I was speaking to someone recently about this who's also an executive coach, and we were sharing about how being our true selves and not editing ourselves and walking our talk is part of the work that we do. We can't profess to our clients to follow their bliss or do what they love or pursue their passions if we aren't doing the same. Season 2 is going to be more about the how. How do I take these things forward? What are the tools that we're talking about? How do we apply those in our lives in a concrete way? So I'll be sharing the space with some of my colleagues who are executive coaches, who lead retreats, who take people on journeys, and we'll hear more about application on a day-to-day basis of these tools of, as I like to say, walking the mystical path with practical feet. I've been really thinking about this concept of spirituality and what it means to me personally. How do I describe that? How do I define that? And I was recently looking at photos from my childhood, and I noticed that in almost every photo, I was either holding a cat, petting a horse. I was in nature, I was camping, I was fishing, I was kayaking. And it just made me realize that these memories of laying under the stars with my mom next to the tent and being in the ocean, all of these experiences that make me feel that there's something larger than myself, that there's something greater at work than just my day-to-day existence. That's how I would define spirituality. And I was remembering an experience that I had in South America, and I had been divorced and I was in sort of a dating phase, and I went with gentleman who I was friends with at the time. We were just friends, and yet I had feelings for him. And we went on this trip, and the whole trip was this kind of series of synchronicities, and that the night before we were supposed to go, there was a horrible rainstorm, and there was I think it was like a coup happening in Argentina, and people were marching in the streets in Buenos Aires, and the banks were closing, and the market was plummeting, and really sounded dangerous. And my mother called and she said, I just saw this on the news. I hope you're not planning on taking that trip. And I was really debating, but the flight was from San Francisco through Santiago, Chile to Mendoza. And I thought, well, worst case scenario, I stay in Chile and see what happens. And as I was driving home, there was, and I was really holding the question, should I go? Should I go? Should I do this thing? And I had this 10 days planned out in South America, visiting with this friend, going on this trip. It was over the holidays. I was really looking forward to it. And I pulled up to the stoplight, and the car in front of me had a license plate that said LFG 62. Well, my initials are LFG, Laura Frances Gates, and I was born in 1962. And to me, that was the universe saying, go to South America. And I can't explain to you how I know that that was a message, but I knew in that moment, in my heart, it was the right thing to do. And I also knew that if I got halfway there, 90% of the way there, that I didn't have to go all the way across the border if it felt unsafe to me. And so I ended up taking this trip, and I ended up going to Mendoza. And I was very grateful to be able to support people in a time where their tourism season was completely coming to a halt. And then my friend and I, we went on a hike in Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in the Andes. And when I say hike, I am not a mountain climber. Let's just be clear. And the winter here is the summer down there. So it was this summer, and we simply went on a hike, from the parking lot. And at one point in our walk, he took off with the car keys. And we're in this place, remember, no tourists, nobody around. This guy decides he's going to go hiking off into the mountains and leave me on my own with no car keys. And for a while I'm hiking, and it's nice, and I'm enjoying it. It's lovely. And at some point it starts getting dark, and I'm afraid. I'm like, where is this guy? And am I going to be stranded here in the Andes all by myself and get eaten by a bear, or what's going to happen? And then I go from fear to like anger. Because I'm like, where's this guy going? And it all goes back to that story with my dad leaving our family when I was a kid. So this is where it all starts, right? This is where all of our stories start from, is our childhood. And as I'm fuming and angry and stomping, I decided to go over and sit on a rock and figure out what to do while I'm waiting for this person, hopefully to show up. And as I'm sitting on the rock and looking up at the mountain, I see this sun setting on the left over the Andes, and it's just spectacular. I mean, it's like this incredible light show. And then I see the full moon to my right rising to meet above the Andes, and it's just this most incredible show of nature. And in that moment, all of my anger, all of my fear just dissolved. I don't even know how to explain how powerful it was to sit there, and I just felt filled with love, like the love of the universe, the love of nature, the love of the energy of the place that I was in. I felt the power of God just shining out at me, this beauty, this incredible mountain, this gorgeous sunset, this incredibly shiny white moon with the stars starting to come out. And I just had this aha moment of like, what am I doing? Why am I worried about like scratching in the dirt for the scraps of like human love when there's this incredible universal love? And this tiny, pathetic human love that I wasn't able to quote unquote get, that I was trying to obtain from another infallible, totally imperfect human, was kind of ridiculous when I had access to this ginormous kind of fountain of love. And I just started laughing. I just started laughing because it's like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? Why am I wasting my time trying to get something from people who don't have it to give? And I say that with so much forgiveness and empathy. Maybe they have it to give, but they don't want to give it to me. And that's okay too. But it just made me realize I was comparing like this kind of pettiness that I was feeling with this larger sense of love, and how this human love could not compare to this larger, call it spiritual or universal sense of connection that I was feeling. And once I let go, my friend showed up and he said, "Should we go?" And I said, "Sure." And we got in the car and we left. And I didn't even talk about it because there was nothing to talk about. It was like, let's just move on.
Get me out of here. It's time to follow you into the sun. Golden skies lead me down 101.
I drove away from that experience feeling like a completely different person, feeling like a healed person from all of those earlier abandonment experiences that I was feeling wounded by. Something fundamentally inside myself had shifted, something fundamentally where I felt like all these things that were driving me crazy, all these kind of petty annoyances just disappeared. And I had this sense of, no, there are more important things we have to do here. There's a larger system at work, and that's what I want to be a part of. When I think about what this podcast is about and what it's becoming, it's evolving as we're creating it. And that is not an easy thing for me. I like things to be wrapped up in a nice bow. I was recently at a networking event and someone asked me, what do I do? And I talked about my corporate coaching work. And then I kind of offhandedly mentioned that I had just launched a podcast. And a young woman said, "Oh, what's it about?" And I just stumbled over my words. It's kind of, spirituality, consciousness, conscious leadership. And I just noticed that it was uncomfortable for me to talk about these topics out in the world. But for me, when I just go back to what I am looking for in life, what supports me on the journey, and that is constantly seeking, why am I here? What am I here for? Who am I to serve? How am I to serve? That's what grounds me. And I believe, I hope, and wish that the universe is on our side and is guiding us with a loving hand to learn those lessons and overcome those sabotaging fears, doubts, the patterns from childhood, all the things that we need to work on to evolve as humans, to learn and grow and develop, as well as build our abilities to navigate life's challenges. So for some people, life is getting more challenging these days, not less challenging. And how we overcome those experiences is a large part of our learning. I am someone who believes that we all have a purpose, that we came here with kind of a roadmap, maybe not one that we are aware of or that we're able to access right away. But I believe that the more we walk that path, we follow those signs, we say yes to the hard, scary things, we listen to the urges, we notice when we have goosebumps, we notice when we meet someone who we feel is familiar or like we've known this person before. These to me are all messages from the universe that we are on the right path and going in the right direction. The experiences that we've heard about in season 1 with people having life-threatening illnesses or accidents or wake-up calls, to me, are opportunities to stop and reflect and redirect where we're going in life and what we're doing in life. And I'm so grateful for the stories that we hear that help illustrate those moments of inflection, those moments of transformation. I'm trying to give us all practical tools in terms of, how do I find this path? How do I find hope when things feel hopeless? How do I find meaning when things feel meaningless? Give them ideas. People who, if they felt they were older and they'd missed opportunities, hearing some of the participants who have made life changes in their later years has been really inspiring. This podcast is for seekers. I'm a seeker and a learner and an explorer. This is for those of us who want confirmation that this is a worthwhile endeavor to be here. And whether that's overcoming despair, grief, loss, anger, frustration, upheaval, that in the end, that it's worth it, that this is going to take us on a worthwhile journey that we look back from and say, yeah, I did the hard things, I did the scary things, and in the end, it was worth it. One of the things I wanted to share with you all are some of the books that have informed me in my life that I go back to again and again, and some are new, some are old tried and true standbys. One of them is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I read that in the early 90s. I can't even tell you how many times I've read it, and I'm going to read it again because it has been showing back up of people recommending it. Another book is called The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav. That was such an eye-opener in terms of this idea of a soul's path for me. There's a book called Mind Magic by James Doty, who unfortunately recently passed away. He also has a great interview on Mel Robbins' podcast, and he was someone who started with nothing, got a lot of everything, went back to nothing, and talks about how to manifest the life that you want. I found his story quite compelling. There's the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, was made famous by Oprah. I still have not completed this book. It's not very long. I think I've gotten to chapter 2 like 45 times. And I guess that's the chapter I need to keep learning from. But he also wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment that I read in a couple of hours. And that book, The Surrender Experiment, really is almost to me like a workbook for the untethered soul. So I always recommend people starting with that first. Another book that I've recently picked up is called The Art of Infinity, which is a book about the spiritual journey of Albert Einstein by Kieran Fox. Fascinating book. I have underlined so many sentences in that book. And then recently I came across The Awakened Mind by Dr. Lisa Miller, and I have found that to be very insightful in terms of how spirituality helps people who are feeling depressed or suicidal, how having a spiritual mindset can substantially improve people's well-being. I'm taking a spiritual class with a guy out of the UK, and I can talk more about that in an upcoming episode, but he shared statistics about how often people's illnesses stem from stressful situations, anxiety and stress. And so this is also about finding tools to help us be happier in life and be less stressed and navigate our lives with more ease and grace. This podcast is about the signs, surrendering to the signs. And to me, it's not a sign for the sake of a sign. It's a sign as a guide, as a signpost on the road, as an indicator. This morning, my father and I were walking out of the Y, and we were just chatting, and I looked over and I saw on a license plate my sister's initials, JG, Janice Gates, my sister who passed away 3 years ago. And I've just noticed a lot more signs from her. And I've gotten so many messages from people saying, I saw this thing. It reminded me of your sister. I feel like I heard this message coming from your sister. I had a dream about your sister. I walked through the parking lot, and the car next to me also had a license plate with my sister's initials on it. So for me, that again is a message and a sign of like my sister's still here in some form, connected to me, connected to us as a family, and all her friends and people who loved her are still feeling connected to her in some way. Another example of the signs, speaking of my sister, is I was recently on a retreat in Glastonbury in the UK. And one morning I walked past a little alleyway, and I didn't have time to go and explore it, but it kind of stuck out in my mind as a place I wanted to go back and explore. And I just felt this pull to this little street. So finally, on the last day, I had a few minutes over lunch and I decided to go check it out. And when I went down the alleyway, I just took a quick snapshot. And as I was turning to go, I looked at my phone, and the photo on my phone had a shop sign that said, Janice made this. There's actually a store that makes shawls, and the name of the store is Janice Made This. The fact that I was pulled down this alley, that I literally went back on the last day in the last minute to explore whatever was there, and that there was this sign. I mean, I have chills right now up my spine thinking about how these magical, mysterious moments occur. And the logical mind, the rational mind says, oh, I don't have time. I've got to go get a cab, to get a train, to get to the airport. But when we surrender to the signs, when we follow our intuition, when we listen to those little niggles, it is astounding to me where it leads us. And I think if there's one thing I want to impart that I am constantly learning and absolutely still a student of, is that our rational minds do not hold all the answers. Our rational minds do not have all the solution. There's all of this wisdom around us, and whether that wisdom is coming from our ancestors or nature or our animals or a sign in an alleyway, there's all of this available to us when we are willing to suspend our disbelief and be open to the possibilities of what is here to be conveyed to us. I don't think that the universe wants to make us have a hard life. I think the universe is trying to help us have a better life. And if we can be open to the messages and the guidance that are coming our way, I do think we feel more supported, we feel more guided, and we feel more in tune with this greater wisdom that is wanting to flow through us. I'm a huge fan of listening to and paying attention to our dreams. I was raised in a family where everyone was in Jungian analysis and talking about their dreams at the breakfast table and writing down their dreams. And I'm not so good at writing my dreams, but I do try to recall them and think about them in the morning when I wake up. And I usually know when I have a dream that's significant, other than, just processing my day. One of the things I find very interesting when you reflect on some of the conversations that we've had in this first round of interviews is that when people have these experiences of being confronted in their lives with change, part of what we have to go through with change is that things have to change. And as humans, I find in general that we don't like change. We like things, we like our routines, we like our comfort. We don't often seek change. And that's why these moments can be so disruptive and so confronting. And one of those things that we might have to change is our relationships with other people. I've been with my husband now for 23 years, 23 and a half years now. And that relationship, if we had not evolved constantly over this time, I'm convinced we would not still be together. We had to be willing to change ourselves, change how we saw our relationship, change how we related to each other. So I feel like one of the challenges that we experience is this person good for me or not? Just like the example that I gave of the woman asking the universe for a sign. We often feel like we should be loyal to people, or we should care about people, or we should be giving to people. And sometimes people aren't good. Sometimes people aren't nice. Sometimes people aren't caring. Sometimes people don't reciprocate. And that's, for me, I think the most challenging, because I always think the best of people and I always want things to be good for people and I always want to give my best. And sometimes part of our decision making is choosing to not continue a relationship or to distance ourselves from someone or to change the nature of the relationship. And I think that's very challenging because, again, we want to believe in people. We want things to stay the way they are. And that can cause heartache. It can cause strain. And yet I feel like part of being kind to ourselves and being forgiving to ourselves and others is sometimes those relationships aren't the healthiest. So knowing when to let go or when to try to evolve a relationship, I think is really important. And what has helped me in that regard is to look at the relationships I'm in from the perspective of not like, oh, this is my father, I should get along with him, but, oh, this is like a karmic relationship. This is someone who I came into the world with some kind of agreement that we were going to learn something from each other. We were going to come in with a lesson. And when I see my relationship with my father or my husband or anyone else as what is my soul's agreement with this person? What is the opportunity that I have here? And sometimes that opportunity is to not stay in the relationship. Sometimes that opportunity looks different when viewed from the lens of what's the karmic pattern to break? What's the ancestral pattern to break? I have a young man who I guess you could say I'm mentoring him. He was from my community and I supported him he chose to go into the military and we stay connected on WhatsApp. And, he's really trying very hard to break away from his family of origin that has gone through a lot of trauma. And it's not that he doesn't love them. It's not that he doesn't care about them. But in order to live his life and to embark on a new path in his life, he has to let go of some of the things in his past. And I think that willingness to let go, that willingness to also surrender for our own healing, to save our own selves so that we're not drowned by the drowning victim is crucial. Another thing that I think about when I think about the signs is, for example, my husband and I don't have children. And I was divorced in my early 30s. My husband and I didn't meet until my late 30s. And we had some challenges trying to conceive. We went through fertility, all sorts of things. And one day I was reading a book and this woman was writing about her fertility journey. And she mentioned some of the practitioners she was going to try to get pregnant. And they were the same practitioners that I was going to. And she said, I just decided I was done and I was letting go. And reading this book and reading her words and reading that she'd been to the same people we were going to, just something clicked in me of like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is stressful. It's putting a strain on our relationship. It's putting a strain on my body physically. I don't want to do this. And At the same time, my niece was I think she was around 2 years old when we started going through all this. And I would say to her, well, we have to go to the doctors now and we're going to try to have a baby. And she would say, I'm the baby. And we would all laugh. And isn't this funny? And da 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 da. Well, you know, when my sister passed away, my niece was my baby. So you just never know how you're going to have children, in what form you're going to have children. When I was going through my fertility challenges, I read a book by a gentleman named Walter McKitchen, and the book was called Spirit Babies. In his book, Walter McKitchen talks about this concept of spirit babies, which is that there are spirits out in the universe looking for their parents to come to. And what I realized through that process is that my husband and I weren't necessarily going to have our own children, but we were here to help other people and other people's children. So there have been numerous young people who've come into my life that I have felt supportive of. If I had had my own children, I would not have been able to give as much of my time and energy to others as I have. And so something that at the time felt painful and felt like a failure, quite honestly, to produce children as a woman really has become more of a gift, that when other parents or other mothers didn't have what they needed to take care of their kids, I was there and I was of support, and I will continue to be of support. And that to me has been such a blessing. For those of you who listened to the entirety of season 1 of Surrendering to the Signs podcast, I want to thank you for being here and joining us on the journey. For wrapping up season 1, I want to first and foremost thank my husband Lawrence and my dog Luna, who have patiently waited quietly while I kept shushing everyone that I was recording a podcast. And keeping a Great Pyrenees quiet, if anyone's had one, is quite a monumental feat. I also want to thank Daniel D'Souza, who we reconnected after 30 years. He re-entered my life and was a huge catalyst for this podcast, both in the idea and conception, as well as creating artwork for it, music production, and the editing of the podcast. And Kaylee Johnstone and her team at Cause PR, including Kaylee, Daisy, Jen, Jennifer, and Elspeth, who helped us get out of perfection mode and into launching mode so that this could be in your hands to listen to. Also, 1 million thank yous. I want to thank all of our guests from season 1, my dad, Bob Gates, Sarah Nicotra, Jerry Esposito, Cheryl Barr, Tessie Epkepke, Allison Segraves, and Ruud Hopstocken. Thank you all for being our first guests, for trusting the process and sharing your stories with us. I want to thank all of you who have reached out to us and thanked us for the podcast and shared your stories of signs and synchronicities. People have sent me notes saying that nature gave them an answer in some way. I had someone reach out and say that they were questioning whether they should continue with a relationship or not, and said, I need a sign right away if I should be in this relationship. And right that minute, the person they were questioning about called them. So, this works, and I love hearing about your experiences. I love hearing that these stories have been healing for you in some way, that they have been inspiring you in some way. And I really want to keep that communication open. So please send us your stories, send us your thoughts and questions. If you have requests of what you want to hear more, please reach out and we'll be happy to connect with you. As always, I thank you for listening, for being with us, for giving the time of your day to us, and hopefully it's been worthwhile. over at the surrenderingtothesigns.com Facebook page. If you click on there, you'll see all of our updates. We also have an Instagram page that we're continually updating and adding more resources to. And then on the website, surrenderingtothesigns.com, you can download our e-guide. We're also working on more resources that we'll be sharing there as well. And I wish you a wonderful holiday season and look forward to coming back for season 2.